In the sultry heat of Louisiana, 1822, beneath the shadow of Spanish moss and the crack of the overseer's whip, a white widow dared to do the unthinkable. She took a black man into her bed, into her heart, and into the very mansion, built on the backs of his people. What happened next shocked an entire colony, tore apart a family fortune, and exposed the raw hypocrisy of a society that preached purity while drowning in sin. This is the true story of the White Widow's black secret. My name is the voice you hear in the darker corners of history. And today, on Against History, we're pulling back the silk curtains on one of the most forbidden love affairs in American history. Before we step onto that blood-soaked plantation, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell, because the stories told here are the ones they tried to bury. Imagine a woman dressed in mourning black, standing on the wide gallery of a grand Creole mansion as the Mississippi rolls past like a slow brown serpent. Her name was Madame Marie Deline Bernard, 34 years old, twice widowed, and now the wealthiest woman for 50 miles in any direction. Her second husband had died suddenly of yellow fever only 8 months earlier, leaving her 3 plantations, 200 enslaved souls, and a reputation as cold as the marble tomb she had just raised in his name. But the neighbors whispered something else behind their lace fans. The widow was far too beautiful to remain alone for long, skin like fresh cream, eyes the color of gathering storm clouds, and a waist so small it made men forget their manners. They said she walked the levee at dusk simply to feel eyes upon her. They were not wrong. One humid evening in June 1822, a new man arrived at Belle Reve Plantation in chains. His name was Jupiter, 28 years old, 6'4" of solid muscle, skin the color of polished mahogany, born in Senegal, sold in Charleston, whipped in Virginia, and finally delivered to Louisiana like a prize stallion. The overseer bragged that he could pick 800 pounds of cotton a day without breaking a sweat. When Jupiter was marched past the big house for branding, Marie stood on the gallery watching. Something passed between them in that single glance, something dangerous, electric, forbidden by every law written and unwritten in the Louisiana Code Noir. The air felt heavier that night. Even the cicadas seemed to fall silent. 3 days later, the house servants began to notice strange changes. Jupiter was moved from the quarters to a small room behind the kitchen, usually reserved for the lady's personal driver. Soon after, he was given a new linen shirt, the kind worn by free men of color in New Orleans. Then, on a moonless night, the widow's bedroom door remained closed until noon the following day. Louisiana in 1822 did not forgive. A white woman who touched a black man faced social death at best, and the lash or the noose at worst. Yet Marie Bernard had never been skilled at following rules. Louisiana was no longer French, and not quite American either. It was a strange, feverish place where old Catholic laws still clung to the walls like mold. The Code Noir, that brutal slave code written by Louis XIV himself, was still quoted in courtrooms from Baton Rouge to the Gulf. Article 6 was perfectly clear. Any white person who engaged in sexual relations with a slave would be fined, whipped, or worse. If the white person was a woman, the slave was usually executed on the spot, his body left hanging from a tree as a warning. Everyone knew the law. No one believed it would ever be tested by someone like Marie Bernard. At first, the affair existed only as a ghost story whispered in the slave quarters after dark. Jupiter was seen slipping through the back gallery at 2 a.m, barefoot, carrying nothing but the lingering scent of the widow's jasmine perfume on his skin. Old Aunt Zuzu, the cook, swore she heard the great 4-poster bed creaking like a ship caught in a storm. The housemaid, a frightened girl named Celeste, was paid in silver dollars to keep her mouth shut and her eyes fixed on the floor. Marie didn't even try to hide it from the people she owned. That was the first shock. She began taking meals with Jupiter on the side porch, something no white woman had done in living memory. She let him wear her dead husband's silk waistcoat. She even had the carpenter build him a proper bed in the attic above her room, connected by a hidden staircase behind the armoire. Word spread faster than yellow fever. By August, neighboring planters refused to sit at her table. The priest from St. Martinville stopped coming to say Mass at Belle Rive. Letters flew upriver to New Orleans. Madame Bernard has lost her mind, or worse, she has chosen to lose it. Marie's answer was simple. She threw the grandest ball Louisiana had seen since the Americans took over. 200 guests. Crystal shipped from Paris. Champagne smuggled past the customs men. And there, in the center of the ballroom, she danced the waltz with Jupiter, his dark hand resting on the small of her snow-white back, while the orchestra played too loudly and every mirror in the house reflected pure scandal. Half the guests walked out before the oysters were served. The other half stayed to watch the fire burn. The ball ended at 4 a.m. with the crash of a crystal chandelier. A drunken planter's son swung his cane at Jupiter's head and missed. The cane struck the ceiling instead, and 1,000 shards rained down like ice. Marie laughed, high and wild, then took Jupiter by the hand and walked straight up the grand staircase in front of everyone still standing. The message was unmistakable. By dawn, the whole parish knew exactly who warmed the widow's bed. By noon the next day, 3 things happened almost at once. First, Marie's older brother, Etienne, arrived from New Orleans in a cloud of dust and fury. He was a lawyer, thin as a switchblade, and still believed family honor could be beaten back into place with words or pistols. He stormed into the house, demanding to speak to his sister alone. Servants heard shouting, a slap, then silence. Etienne left an hour later, face pale, his hat crushed in his hand. Second, the local magistrate, Judge Prudden, sent a polite but icy letter. Madam was requested, meaning ordered, to appear before the parish court in 2 weeks to answer certain grave rumors. Everyone understood what that meant. They were coming for Jupiter. Third, Marie did something no one expected. She walked to the slave quarters herself, barefoot in the midday sun, and told every man, woman, and child they were free to leave if they wished. Papers or no papers, she would not hold them. About 30 took the offer and vanished into the cypress swamps before nightfall. The rest, those too old, too frightened, or too loyal, stayed. Jupiter stayed. That night, Marie sat on the gallery with Jupiter beside her, his massive hand covering hers. Fireflies drifted like slow sparks. She told him what everyone already knew. They would hang him, then ruin her. She asked him to run. He refused. I was born in chains, he said in the soft French he had learned on the plantation. If I die, let it be in your arms, not running like a dog. Marie kissed him before the moonlit river. Somewhere downstream, a steamboat whistle screamed like a warning. 2 weeks later, the parish courthouse in St. Martinville was packed tighter than a slave ship. Planters in white linen, their wives clutching rosaries, free men of color who had come to watch justice twist itself into knots. Every bench groaned. Judge Prudden sat high on his bench like a vulture in black robes, ready to pronounce sentence the moment Jupiter was dragged in wearing irons. Except Jupiter never arrived. At dawn that same day, Marie Bernard walked into New Orleans alone, dressed head to toe in morning black, her veil so thick no one could see the triumph in her eyes. She went straight to the office of the most expensive lawyer in Louisiana, Pierre Sol, the same man who would one day defend assassins in court and still win. She carried a leather satchel heavy with gold Spanish doubloons and something far more dangerous, documents. By noon, rumors were racing through the city faster than mosquitoes. Madame Bernard had filed manumission papers for Jupiter. Yes, but that was only the beginning. She had also submitted a petition claiming Jupiter was not, in fact, a slave at all. According to papers supposedly signed in Charleston before the Louisiana Purchase, Jupiter had been born free in Senegal, kidnapped by Portuguese slavers, and illegally sold in America. If the court accepted the claim, every lash he had ever received was a crime. And every day Marie had kept him after her husband's death made her the victim, not the criminal. The parish exploded. Half the planters called it forgery. The other half suddenly remembered pressing debts and decided they did not want federal marshals examining their own questionable bills of sale. Judge Prudden received 3 anonymous letters threatening to burn his house if he ruled against the widow. Two more promised the same if he ruled in her favor. While the white world argued over ink and seals, Marie slipped back upriver at night on a pirogue paddled by 4 trusted men. She found Jupiter waiting on the levee, no chains, no fear in his eyes. She handed him a forged passport declaring him Jean-Baptiste Bernard, libre. Then she did the one thing that turned scandal into legend. She married him. Not in a church, no priest in Louisiana would dare, but beneath a giant live oak at midnight, with only the river and runaway slaves hidden in the swamp as witnesses. She placed a plain gold ring on his finger and spoke the vows in French, in English, and in the few words of Wolof she had learned from him. When it was done, she was no longer a widow. She was a wife again, this time to the man the law still called property. The parish awoke to find the big house shuttered, the fields untended, and a single lantern burning on the gallery, like a dare. For 6 weeks, Belle Rive Plantation stood like a fortress under siege. Yet no soldiers ever came. The shutter stayed closed by day, opening only at night when lanterns drifted through the house like fireflies. Food and barrels of wine arrived by boat, unloaded by silent black men who vanished again before sunrise. The neighbors watched from a distance, too frightened or too confused to act. Inside, Marie and Jupiter lived the strangest honeymoon in Louisiana history. They ate from gold plates, made love on Persian carpets, and planned a future that should have been impossible. Marie wrote letters in her elegant hand to merchants in Havana, Veracruz, and Port-au-Prince, places where a rich white woman with a black husband might still walk the streets without being stoned. Jupiter taught her Wolof phrases and how to load a pistol faster than any Creole gentleman. They laughed at the absurdity of it all. Then, on the night of November 12, 1822, the lanterns at Belle Rive went dark for good. At 2 a.m, 22 pirogues and a flatboat loaded with furniture, silver, and 30 freed people slipped away from the landing. Marie stood at the bow of the lead boat, her black veil replaced by a simple red tint. Jupiter stood at the helm, steering by starlight. They drifted south with the current, past sleeping plantations, past cypress knees clawing at the moonlit water. By dawn, they reached New Orleans. Instead of hiding, Marie marched straight to the Cabildo and registered the marriage herself, signing the book, Marie de Line Bernard. Jean-Baptiste Bernard, libre. The Spanish clerk crossed himself, but the ink dried all the same. The city that prided itself on loose morals still gagged. American ladies fainted in the street at the sight of them walking arm in arm through the French Quarter. Marie bought a house on Rue de l'Arsenal, painted it the color of fresh blood, and hung a sign that read simply, Maison Bernard. Inside, former slaves ate at the same table as their former mistress. Outside, crowds gathered every day, some to curse, others just to stare. Within a month, the Louisiana legislature rushed through a new law. Any white woman who married a man of color would lose her citizenship and her property. They made it retroactive, crafted solely for her. The Attorney General prepared papers to seize everything she owned. Marie answered with another midnight escape, this time aboard a schooner bound for Veracruz, its holds packed with cotton, gold, and 30 human beings who were finally free. As the sails filled with wind, Jupiter stood beside her on deck and asked quietly, do you regret it? She looked back at the fading lights of Louisiana and said, I only regret we didn't burn the plantation on the way out. The schooner dropped anchor in Veracruz on a January morning so bright it stung the eyes. Salt wind snapped the Mexican flag above the fortress of San Juan de Ulua. For the first time in his life, Jupiter stepped onto land where no man could legally own him. Marie kissed the ground like a pilgrim, then turned and kissed him harder. They bought a sprawling hacienda outside the city, red tiles, white walls, bougainvillea spilling purple across the courtyard. The locals called it La Casa Roja. Former Belle Rive slaves, now paid servants, filled the rooms with laughter in 3 languages. Marie traded widows black for bright Yucatan cotton dresses, while Jupiter let his hair grow long and rode into town on a black stallion with a silver-trimmed saddle that had once belonged to a Louisiana governor. Word traveled quickly across the Gulf. Runaways began appearing at the gates, thin, scarred, half-dead from the journey. Marie took them all in. Within a year, La Casa Roja sheltered more than 60 fugitives. She paid a crooked priest to forge baptism papers declaring each arrival freeborn in Senegal or liberated by royal decree. Officials in Veracruz looked the other way. Her gold weighed more than American outrage. Back in Louisiana, the legend turned bitter. Planters warned their children that the widow had sold her soul to African devils and now danced naked beneath the Mexican moon. Her brother Etienne drank himself to death, muttering that the family name was forever tainted. The plantation she abandoned rotted into the river. Cypress trees swallowed the big house, and alligators nested where the ballroom chandelier once hung. In 1825, Marie gave birth to a daughter, her skin the warm shade of café au lait, her eyes the exact gray of her mother's. They named her Liberté. On the day of her baptism, the entire household, freed people, Mexican servants, even the French consul, drank rum on the veranda while Jupiter lifted the baby toward the sun and sang a Wolof lullaby older than slavery itself. But empires remember. American agents began circling Veracruz, offering rewards for runaway property. In 1827, a Louisiana planter named Duval recognized Jupiter in the market and sent urgent letters north. Within weeks, a U.S. naval sloop anchored in the harbor, waiting for orders that never quite came. Mexico refused to extradite. Marie felt the danger in the air. She was 39 now, still beautiful, but the coastal fever had begun to burn in her lungs. One stormy evening, she made Jupiter swear that if anything happened to her, he would take Liberté and everyone at La Casa Roja and disappear deeper into Mexico, perhaps to Yucatan, perhaps into mountains even the Spanish had never ruled. He swore it on the gold ring she had given him beneath the Louisiana oak. Yellow fever came in the summer of 1828 like divine punishment. It began in the port, swept through the markets, then crept up the dusty road to La Casa Roja. First the children fell, then the old cook from Belle Rive, and finally Marie herself. For 10 days, she burned on silk sheets soaked in vinegar and rum. Her gray eyes looked enormous in a face thin to paper. Jupiter never left her side. When the heat became unbearable, he carried her down to the cool tile floor, slipped lime water between her cracked lips, and sang the same Wolof songs he sang to their daughter. The local doctor only shook his head, muttering about blood too rich for the tropics. On the 11th night, Marie woke clear-eyed. She gripped Jupiter's hand and whispered in French, "If I die, burn everything. Let them find nothing but ash and the name Liberté." She did not die that night. She lingered 3 more weeks, growing lighter in his arms until she weighed no more than child. On September 9, 1828, just after the bells of Veracruz rang for vespers, Marie de Line Bernard drew her final breath with Jupiter's lips against her ear and their daughter asleep beside them on the bed. That same night, Jupiter did exactly as she asked. He waited until the household was drunk on grief and rum. Then he opened the strong box, took every coin and every paper that proved who they were, and walked through the hacienda, pouring lamp oil over Persian rugs, French furniture, and the portrait of Marie in her Louisiana morning dress. When the flames roared up the walls, he carried Liberté, now 3 years old, wrapped in a blanket, mounted the black stallion, and led 60 people into the dark. The fire lit the sky red for 2 days. Mexican soldiers arrived to find only smoking tiles and an iron gate twisted like melted candy. They searched the ashes for bodies and found none. The legend was complete. The white widow and her black husband had vanished in fire, carrying their sin and their freedom with them. But stories like this never truly end. They say Jupiter rode west for 40 days, past sugar estates, past Mayan ruins swallowed by jungle, until the trail dissolved into the misty highlands of Oaxaca. There, in a village that had never heard of Louisiana or the Code Noir, he bought land with the last of Marie's doubloons and built a small coffee finca beneath the shadow of a volcano. The people who followed him scattered seeds, married locals, and faded into the mountains like smoke. Liberté grew tall and fearless, gray eyes set in a bronze face, speaking Spanish, French, and Wolof before she turned 10. When anyone asked who her mother had been, Jupiter answered only, "Mundo para Minos lies a woman who burned the world so we could be free." Back in Louisiana, the story curdled into something monstrous. By the 1840s, travelers along the Mississippi were told that the ghost of a white woman in black silk walked the ruined gallery of Belle Rive, calling for a lover who never came. Children were warned that if they misbehaved, Madame Bernard's devil would drag them into the swamp. The family name was so thoroughly cursed that even her cousins changed theirs to escape the stain. But truth has a way of outrunning lies. In 1887, an American journalist hunting exotic stories stumbled into that Oaxacan village and saw a beautiful old woman with storm cloud eyes presiding over a coffee harvest. When he asked her name, she smiled and said, "Liberté Bernard, granddaughter of a Louisiana widow who loved too hard and paid the price." She showed him a gold ring worn thin, engraved inside with the date November 12, 1822, and a single word, toujours. The article ran in Harper's Magazine under the title The White Widow Who Vanished in Flames. It was read, debated, and quietly buried by Southern editors who preferred their history bleached clean. Yet every year, on the night of September 9th, the descendants of those 60 fugitives still light bonfires in the mountains and pour rum into the flames for a woman who chose love over everything her world told her she was allowed to want. Marie Deline Bernard died at 39. Penniless by Louisiana standards, rich beyond measure by any other. She broke every law, lost every acre, and in the end kept the only things that ever mattered: the man she loved and the child they made. History tried to erase her. History failed. And that is the real secret of the White Widow.